Hello, awesome viewer. I just want to give a spoiler warning before you watch this interview with Alex. Make sure you have watched up till episode 18, otherwise some things might be spoiled for you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hello everyone at home. We are here today, the second episode of GM Talk with the man, the legend, the rock star himself, Alex Kairos, or at least the player behind him.
Yeah.
This is just a podcasty thing, sort of an interview you can listen to, or if you want to watch our pretty faces, you are more than welcome. The first question I have for you, Alex, is how did you get introduced to tabletop RPGs? What's your origin story?
I started with Dungeons and Dragons, like a lot of people.
Which edition?
I started with second edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, yeah. I would like to claim the original edition, but alas, I was too young at that point to get started on that. But second edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I was all over it. Had pretty much every one of the handbooks that they put out, and so yeah, I was into that pretty hardcore. I didn't start out really. I mean, I started out as a player for a little bit, but it wasn't long before I jumped into the DMing storytelling side of it. So yeah, I've kind of had some experience with that, and it was a lot of fun. And then you know, went other places in my life, and it kind of dropped for a little while before I picked it up again with fifth edition. And then from there, I got into Vampire when fifth edition got out as well. I'd known about it beforehand, as well as Mage and other things, but I hadn't really had much experience playing the anniversary editions of it, the 20th edition. So mostly fifth edition is kind of where I picked it up.
That leads into my next question. What was your introduction to Vampire then? Much later, I gather.
Yeah. So World of Darkness was kind of familiar to me, but I didn't really have a group or anything to play Vampire with or anything like that. Back when I was doing second edition D&D, of course, the internet was just in its infancy and everything like that. So it wasn't as if you had Discord groups and everything else that you could just kind of hook up with and do that sort of thing, which is a great boon to tabletop RPGs today. I think it brings a lot of people together
Definitely.
in a very easy way, whereas before you kind of had to hope and cross your fingers that that your local game shop or your neighborhood had enough people who were interested in it and you were in with them. So yeah, the before four times. So you're familiar with those, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, I took a hiatus from tabletop for a little while I went through graduate school and things like that. And then I picked it up actually I picked up D&D again with fifth edition. And I also picked up fifth edition Vampire when they released it, pretty much. Like I was like, I'm going to get into this time around. I'm going to get into this. I actually had snooped around in Requiem for a little while when it came out, way back at the early aughts.
What, second edition? Some very
yeah. It was that new reboot that they tried to do with Chronicles of Darkness and everything with Onyx Path, I think, but I never really. Again, it was kind of a lack of people and interest. That, as everybody who's been in the Vampire World of Darkness community pretty much is familiar with, like, you have two groups of people now. You have World of Darkness and you have Chronicles of Darkness, and never the two mix or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. It's kind of niche compared to
it's
D&D.
kind of niche, and that's why I discovered too. So it didn't really. It was kind of a dead start for me. So I wasn't able to get back into Vampire until, like I said, with the arrival of fifth edition, which, I mean, the mechanics of it are great. Really love the hunger dice mechanic and things like that. Really adds a kind of risk to the game that adds to the suspense. And
exactly,
I mean, you can tell anybody who's ever rolling those dice a few times and the hunger starts creeping up. you start to see it all over their faces, like, oh my god.
Yeah, yeah.
So
This is not
I
gonna
thought it was
end
a
well.
genius mechanic. Like if it was just that mechanic all by itself, like it'd still be a great addition. Like I just thought whoever came up with that was they were on the ball with that. That was a good idea. So
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with the previous systems, but the way it was explained to me is sort of like you had a like a blood pool or a mana kind of thing where you could just
right.
like spend points, but as long as you kept it at above a certain level, it was fine. But this is like even with just one hunger, shit can go really really wrong.
It can go really, really wrong. Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
mean, there is always that ever-present danger. It's not like, hey, we're running low on gas and should probably stop. It's more like you could blow out your tire right now and not even understand why.
yeah.
So,
I think if I can like give you a bit of credit, I think you're like at least in my opinion, you are very aware of that and you kind of play around it as much as possible. I think
oh yeah,
Alex has been one of the least hungry
yeah.
in the coterie for a long time, except that episode that Vaughn was gone.
That Vaughn wasn't there to take back his curse. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, and yeah, I'm very aware of the mechanic, and Alex is he's a Ventru, and everybody can play Ventru a different way, right? And just like any of the clans, like the what they have for it is kind of like a template, but just as a player and as an ST, I would encourage any player, if you're just coming to this first time, you don't need to understand all the things about the clans or anything else. Like make the clan kind of what you want it to be, but also like look at the spirit of it and things like that. So Alex is like a Ventru, and in my opinion, Ventru kind of have their shit together most
yeah,
days. They button up, they put on the tie, they go to work. It's one of those things where they're kind of like the calm center, and it's not because they're calm on the inside because the beast, but it's because they're just able to maintain that composure.
I was about
Uh,
to say that there's a very big difference between who your character is and what your beast is like.
right,
Because
right,
Alex is kind of laid back, he's the rockstar type, but the beast
exactly,
is still very much ventral.
exactly, yeah,
And fortunately, except perhaps a few times with Killjoy, no one has really opposed Alex in that way. Like they accepted him as the de facto leader of the coterie from the very beginning. I mean, under pressure
right,
given, but it's still like I feel like people look to you for leadership naturally, which
yes,
works very well because if people keep saying no to the Ventru, that's an issue for the
it is an issue,
for the beast at least.
yeah. Um, that's I mean, if anybody's been watching this the series for a long time since episode one, yeah, absolutely. You bring up Killjoy, and Alex's position has been kind of a tenuous one. Um, he's he's not actually been on board with the whole Ventru boardroom mission from the start of his life and things like that. So he's kind of coming from a different place. He's been able to kind of play up that rock star lifestyle. There's a little Lestat in there, I guess,
Mm,
and he's been kind of like able to get distant from it from time to time. He of course has also that blended with the years of call it indoctrination, but it's actually just like, hey, you're a Ventru now, and like with his sire, and you're going to learn how to do all these things, like run a business and do all this stuff, and you can do your rock star thing and whatever, but you're going to learn all this too. So yeah, he's been kind of between two worlds there,
he was very
and
much pulled into the world like against his will in a sense
right,
without spoiling too much
exactly,
about your backstory. That Alex is also the youngest one in the coterie,
yeah,
which
yeah,
makes me smile sometimes
yeah,
when he's
yeah,
just taking charge.
exactly,
Which is
yeah,
also how he can like maintain his mask or whatever you want to call it, his rockstar persona,
right,
and
right.
of course with the bath salts and all the things that keep you young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's balancing a lot. He's got a lot of different sides to him. Most days, like most times, if you just watch Alex in a gameplay and stream, he presents one face. Like it's kind of like he's got. It seems like it's all fairly straightforward and above board with him, but he's actually got a whole bunch underneath that. Yeah, he's. It's good that he has the composure and the mask, which like is his highest. Like his composure is his like highest trait, and so he's able to keep it together and just sell it, even though he's got about 100 things underneath the surface. They're like all like, all right,
Oh yeah, it's
competing for attention there.
but just
So
maintaining the facade of uh,
yes,
of everything. I especially enjoyed the when you received the book,
yes,
how you felt inside, or Alex felt inside, but he managed to keep his shit together in front of another Ventru, which is quite impressive.
right,
And
yeah,
and just being basically playing his grandsire.
exactly, exactly, yeah. And I'm happy to talk about any of that. But yeah, it seems like every night he faces that need and that challenge to be one thing
Mm.
for the sake of the situation, while on the inside he does feel other things, and he doesn't let it show most times. In fact, I don't think he's had his compulsion come out yet.
No,
Um,
you kind of acted it out at some point at yourself, which made me
yeah,
super happy
yeah,
when you
yeah,
met the king.
yeah,
Alex was not happy.
yes,
That was, I
yes,
think that was the only time they've seen him upset
right,
and
yeah.
angry, and not that he lost his shit, but he was not happy about the situation.
Yeah, that was very deliberate, and yeah, I expected that to surprise some people in the sense that like most of the times Alex is fairly easygoing. Like I said, you mentioned like he puts up with a lot of backhanded comments and things like that from not only Killjoy but the Anarchs and everything else. But in Alex's mind, there's the two factions. There's those people who are with me and those people who are against me. And Falacia, it was like he was the fact that he was Bruja didn't even really come into it as much as here's this other leader who says he's going he's rules the city, and in Alex that's like one fixed truth, like
Yeah,
Alex is going to rule London. There's no debate or question about it. Like he will not brook any discussion about it. So this normally reasonable, laid back guy will suddenly be like, no, like
that was
you're gonna have
one
to come
of
over me if you want that.
that was one of the
Yeah,
moments where you pulled the rock from
yeah,
under me, where you wanted to intimidate the guy, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, okay, let's see where this goes.
yeah, 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 yeah. And
And it
that's the way
was
he is. Yeah, he's got that in him where he really he firmly knows what he wants. He wants to rule. If he has to put up with some shit from slightly unruly subjects, that's okay. But like it's one of those things where he will not have his rule challenged. And
but keeping his shit together and actually being able to
yeah,
take that kind of abuse, I know that at
yeah,
least that's partly how you earn Gabriel's respect, by not
yeah,
really reacting to it, or
right,
being like a Bruja is trying to piss off the Ventru, and
yeah,
you're not falling into the trap,
exactly.
which earns his respect in a way. And then I feel like Gabriel and Alex are not close, but at least they have an understanding and some kind of respect for each other.
Right, exactly. And that's the kind of respect that Alex is kind of trying to navigate and cultivate is just like you said, he sees the composure, he sees the non-reaction as kind of a way to rise above it instead of like coming down on it. Like coming down on it in my mind would be a very stereotypical Ventru thing to do, but it would also be what the beast wants to do. And Alex is like, you know what? I'm better than this. And in his mind, it shows a better ruler if he doesn't go for the go for the bait. So if he can sustain it and basically go, as long as there's no serious threat to his reign or rule, and everybody really knows at the end of the day who's in charge, like he's like, yeah, whatever. so yeah, I'm better than this type of thing. That's the way he looks at it, and I don't need to, stoop to that level. I don't need to get down there and mess around with that. So yeah.
We're gonna come back to a few in-game moments, but I just wanted to ask you, what drew you to the campaign when I sent out the message that I was looking for players? Because we didn't know each other beforehand.
No, we didn't know each other. Um, I really enjoyed the whole premise. Like it was in the aftermath of the Second Inquisition, Operation Antigen, everything that happens in the fall of London. And I'm familiar with that book. I'm familiar with it and the events in it and what happens in Mithras and all of it. And so for me, it was like, I mean, I'll be completely honest. First of all, like the time slot fit for me really well. Like Sunday afternoons every other week, that's like a sweet spot for me. Like, okay, yeah, I can really do that. But really, like being able to play beyond the book, being able to play, I'm familiar with the backstory, the history, the material, and everything like that. But being able to play, okay, so this is what's happened. Now, what happens next? Where does London go from here? And I thought that the fact that honestly, one of the things that in your setting that really appealed to me was in this aftermath, there is a dearth of kindred. Like there's not that many of them. The power structures have been kind of flattened.
Especially for like a large city for like London.
Exactly. You go anywhere else. I guess in a large lore way and mechanics way, that's what the beckoning and the events of 2012 with SI and everything. That's what they offered to players, and maybe that's what Paradox and World of Darkness and all the rest of them want to give players. But yeah, it's one of those things where you're not like in a normal city in a normal time. Like let's take New York for example. When you see the games, coteries of New York. New York very much has a power structure. They have a Camarilla in place. Those elders have been around. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but yeah, it's kind of like it's all set up. And when you play that game, you are very much aware of that. Like these people have all been here. They're going to be here. You're going to have to navigate that. But London was in your setting was like, oh, a lot of the pieces have been knocked off the board. So for especially a younger vampire like Alex, there's an opportunity there. There's like suddenly everything has been cleared out, and there's like, oh, okay, there's a way for me to make some significant moves here, which
It's
appeals to me personally as a player. In case it wasn't obvious, it's like I like to make big moves, and so much of vampires about making small or subtle moves and things like that. And I'm good with that game, but every now and again I like to bust out and make a big move. So yeah, that really appealed to me. I thought, oh, there's all kinds of opportunities here. It's kind of a clean slate, and who knows where this could go.
for anyone who doesn't know at home, I wanted to create a sandbox, and I felt it was the perfect time for it, because usually if you would play New York Camarilla storyline, and you would just be these neonates that elders pushed around, and
Yeah.
that will be more like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's more like give you a quest, then go do that. Give you a quest, then go do that. And this was more about these five kindred and their own arc, which is why I'm very keen on asking all of you guys, what do you want to do? Really, I have a few things that I need to happen, but anything else is more me reacting to you guys. And I'm happy that it actually appealed to people and
Yeah.
had the best coterie come along.
Yeah. And having an opportunity like, the clans you had suggested that, there would be like Ventru or something like I just went right for it. I thought, here's an opportunity, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about playing the clans. Like, here's an opportunity to play a Ventru who's operating on a little bit of a different level. He's not old as hell. He's not, straight conservative, like, hey, I'm the next of my line type of thing, and here I am. He's not even for all intents and purposes operating on what might normally be a traditionally acceptable level for Camarilla. And so I thought, here's a brand new way to play him as a definitely a very venture ruler type of person, but also like somebody who's very much a different type.
What was your inspiration for Alex, if any? Was it just
Um,
something like I thought it was cool, or were you inspired from any real people, or is just a mix of different personalities?
I I thought, yeah. So when I thought about him again, kind of like when I think of like a clan, I think, how can I make this my own? Like, here's Ventru, they're the kings. That's kind of like their shtick. And so I wanted to take that and go, okay, now how do I twist it and color it in, make it kind of something that I could get behind. And so, I always like to make my characters a little bit unconventional.
Mm.
And so here's this young guy who's basically, he wants to do his own thing. He wants to be a rock star. He's growing up, in the shadow of Margaret Thatcher and everything else. He's just like, he wants to fight the power. He's kind of a little bit of a punk, and that sort of thing. And it doesn't quite work out because that's the way so many of those stories go. And he's embraced, and he's brought into, and so I love the conflict that vampire inherently brings to it, like the beast and the humanity, and like trying to manage those two things, like a beast I am, lest a beast I become type of thing. And so here's this very kind of like, he wants to fight the power, he wants to kind of make music and that sort of thing, and at the same time he's embraced into this very dark rulership type society. And and so yeah, that was kind of like a major thing with him. Like, I wanted to play him and have him walk those two lines and that sort of thing. And then I thought, here's a character who, to get really kind of Freudian with it and everything like that, here's a character who is, he he sees the male figures in his life as like, they're like, you will do this, you will button up, and like he turns away from that to something far more occult and far more, and so Alex is a Bahari underneath. He's a worshiper of Lilith.
I think
And for
might be
exactly,
apparent to some people that there are many layers to Alex, and secrets behind it all.
exactly, and in the series, he's doing his best to keep that kind of either quiet or on the down low as much as possible, because as everybody, well, if you're not familiar with the Bahari, they're a bunch of Lilith worshippers, but the Camarilla really doesn't like them, and most other worshippers of Cain don't really care for them either. And those two sides are antagonistic. But Lilith, she's a primordial entity who comes, and in at least some accounts teaches Cain all of his vampiric traits and everything else. There's an argument to be made that that makes her maybe the first vampire or something. But anyway, she gives him a way to take guidance without feeling like he is upholding just this dark conventional order type of thing. He wants to rule. And the other thing is, he sees this dark conventional order of the Camarilla as kind of like the thing that kind of led to London's collapse. But he's not against it. He's just, he wants to see London thrive. That's the other goal for Alex. Like, he wants to rule it, but he also wants to grow it, and that's where the garden metaphor comes in.
I
He wants to
think
turn it into a garden city. Yeah.
he's very open-minded. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
we talked about this, but you would actually give Primogen status to a Ravnos if you wanted
yes,
it,
exactly,
or Judith,
exactly. Yeah,
a freaking thin blood, right? So
right.
Alex is pretty tolerant and uh, really, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's important that it's different this time around.
Exactly. Exactly. You're exactly right. And that's exactly what the path of Lilith offers for him. Like there's Gardens of Hope, like Budapest, and renewal. And he's down for that mission. He's like, you know what? The Camarel had their chance, but he also knows that the Camarel will come back if they feel like anything's up. So he's playing this shadow game of just kind of like, I'm going to regrow London. I'm going to say on the label that it's Camarilla, but I'm also going to change a lot of things so that it can thrive in a way that it couldn't under the Camarilla.
But
And that's kind of, yeah.
that's the Bahari way, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Budapest is also like they just infiltrated their rule, and it's not really apparent
Right,
to the
exactly.
Camarilla, because if it was, they would have Archons and Justicars uh,
Right.
coming and just wrecking everything, or even just burning it to the ground because they can't have it in the hands of someone who's not fit to rule, or whatever.
Absolutely. And here's I would just want to give a nod to like all the material. I've I have pretty much all the books and I've played the games. I haven't played Swan Song yet, but it's one of those things where I want to give a nod to, well, Bloodlines too, even though it's kind of vaporware at this point. I don't know where it's going,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, but just even though Seattle was a Camarilla city, it was kind of like Prince Cross is kind of like, this, there's the understanding that he's let a whole lot of people in. You start as a thin blood in that game. I don't know if they're going to keep that in there or not, and that sort of thing. So they're really working the thin bloods in there and that sort of thing. And he's all for tech instead of being against it. So he's a little bit alternative. I wanted to give a nod to Night Road, which is like if you haven't played that, story game, the Prince of Tucson is Gangrel, and so you don't often see Gangrel in a Prince role. So I thought, oh, okay, that's a little bit different. And then Coteries of New York, they have a thin blood primogen, and so it was kind of like there's all these great sources that World of Darkness people have put out, and in little ways they kind of nudge and move and change the normal stereotypical order of things.
Mm.
And I drew on that. Like it was kind of like Alex. I see him as kind of a little bit worldly. He's gone around. He's seen how other courts run things a little bit, and he's seen kind of the little eccentricities and the little differences, and he's kind of drawn all that together so that it's not necessarily just hey let's do whatever, but also kind of like what, someone else somewhere has done this and it's not out of the realm of thinking. So yeah, so it's one of those things where he kind of pushes the envelope where he can to try to give a little more breathing room for what the Camarilla might normally be. So,
And I think he would actually be ahead of his time as well, because we are
yeah,
in 2013, and at least in my world, the beckoning has not really begun. Maybe for some, but it's not full blown yet, which is why
right,
the elders are still around and
hanging around.
very much a threat. Um, the next question I have is what was one or maybe more of your favorite moments during what we have played so far? Anything comes to mind? Obviously the book part, but any scenes or interactions that was really funny or
Ooh,
interesting?
okay. um it feels like a lot actually. um I can almost pick out something I really enjoyed from every episode. Like it's something that's been really very kind of funny and interesting, as well as, I don't know, like something I take with me at the end. I will say that uh, there have been a number of meaningful moments for Alex, is what I'll say. I'm just going to focus on him since I want other players to be able to like focus on their own moments too and that sort of thing. But for him, like a number of meaningful moments, like for example, uh, when Josh uh, was introduced, the character you introduced, that's the Malkavian. Malkavians are really difficult to play well. I have played one, and it's one of those things where you have to find a good way to do it, and he really is, and so like his whole detective king thing, it was just like really awesome. Like the first time he's introduced and everything, he just takes everybody by surprise. And then jumping off that meeting with the Anarchs is like when Alex goes outside, he has this conversation with Gabriel, and for the first time, like he's able to kind of like take a step. This follows like um, the initial meeting where the coterie is introduced all the existing kindred in London, or at least a portion of them, and they're basically saying, okay, we're going to set this up again. Elaine and Gabriel are having a fight and that sort of thing, and then so after that, it's like, so for a little while it feels like, okay, they're just going to do exactly what you said. They're going to be giving quests. They're going to be, they're supposed to look out at the SI and the Sabbat and everything like that. But just this moment where he is able to take this first step with Gabriel and say, hey, this is, you and I are not so different. And he begins to work his magic a little bit by saying, like, look, I'm all for you having your bar and everything, but the camera, they'll be back. And that sort of thing. They may step away, but they'll come back. These are beings that live forever.
Mm.
And you need somebody who's going to be able to, actually deal with them. And if they think somebody's on the throne, they'll be less likely to even look into it, and that sort of thing. And I'm the prince you want, type of thing. So, he's kind of like brokering, that deal with Gabriel, even though Gabriel is pretty strong, and Alex is kind of like, this is the way he's been kind of going. It's like he's kind of not the biggest fish in the pond, but he's moving around all these big fish, and he's making his way. So that was a really meaningful, important conversation he had. Just as a player, like I was blown away by like Killjoy the first time. Like, here's this guy. He comes in, he's all buttoned up. Like, it's one of those things. You can tell he's kind of like ready for action, because when the police arrive and everything at that first meeting, like he's all in the shadows with his rifle and everything. He's ready to like just go. And then Alex steps up and goes, no, wait, just let me walk up to these guys and, diffuse the situation, which is kind of like how he likes to do. Because Ventru, he's just like, okay, let me just talk our way through this and we'll be fine. There doesn't need to be anybody killed. And then you see him later, like he's so buttoned up. Like Killjoy is just as tight as he can be sometimes, which is really great contrast, because then we were down with the coterie in the basement of that place where there was the Society of Leopold and the Sabbat and everything. And then all of a sudden Operation Antigen shows up, and it was our first real combat scene. Nathaniel goes all Neo and just stops bullets and everything else. But Killjoy whips out this devil mask and just starts going to town. He's going like, rah, 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 you see this, like, this guy is no longer like, he's not like this buttoned up jazz club owner. He is like going full on beast here. He's just like embracing it, and just, ripping into the guy and everything else. And for Alex, it was kind of like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with here. Okay, all right, wake up call and that sort of thing.
Is it
and
fair to call Killjoy the big gun?
He's definitely he's the one you want on the board. The figure I always think of with Killjoy, honestly, is from movies, is like Achilles. Like, he is kind of like the guy you want on the field when shit goes down. But he's always going to be a little bit antagonistic towards like any kind of structure or order or things like that.
But you did have a nice moment uh, in episode 18 where it's like he's finally okay, you're my prince, and
Right.
we have been through shit. We're brothers now, kind of a moment.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And that's been kind of like that's been kind of like that arc I was talking about earlier when we were talking about like if Alex wasn't kind of who he was and he wasn't able to like just kind of brush off the comments a little bit and things like that, there's a chance that he and Killjoy definitely would have like had some kind of conflict. Um,
he has
and
tried
we
to push.
nearly, yeah, and we nearly saw it when, not too long ago, when they had the underground meeting and Alex was like, this is how things are going to go. And I want the body. I want Bradford's body. And Killjoy's like, I want the body and that sort of thing. And Naomi has to step between them and go, okay, listen,
Well,
Killjoy, and yeah, they've been kind of like friction, up until this point, because Killjoy is just like, let's just go kill everybody. Like when they find Judith, he's like, what are you doing? Why are we taking her with us? That sort of thing. And then after he like takes Judith away, he's like, do you want me to kill her family? And that's what I mean. He's really just like, yeah, he's bloody. So he and Alex is the opposite. He's like the polar opposite. He's like, we're gonna do this, a humane way, without people dying and things like that. And yeah, so they're so polar opposites. And if Alex was any other kind of Ventrue, I'm not sure how it would have gone. And really Killjoy did test him and put him right to his limit. Like
very
I was
intentionally.
about ready to be like, okay, I'm going to roll his arrogance compulsion because he's about had
Yeah,
it. So,
very,
so
very intentionally, I think, from Killjoy's side, doing all
yeah,
the tests.
exactly.
Like,
And then when he comes to the end there in this latest one, and he does say, "Okay, you're my prince now." Like Alex feels like he's of two minds. On one hand, it's like he feels like he accomplished something, and it feels like, okay, good. If I can get Killjoy on my side, I can make this work for anybody. But at the same time, it's like, I never had to pass any of your tests. Like I'm Ventrue, God damn it.
I am good enough. I am
Yeah,
more than
exactly. I'm
good enough.
already good enough. You're the one who has to pass my test, that sort of thing. So yeah, he's of two minds like that. And he never lets on like that. And that's the thing. And we saw that even before the meeting where Killjoy was kind of like questioning, is like, did you want my blood or whatever? And Alex was like, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, can I tell? And he can't. It's just like Alex is just straight up like, you're never gonna get past the friendly mask. It's just like, yeah.
Someday,
So
maybe.
yeah, exactly
All
right.
it takes is one bad roll.
That's right. All it takes is one bad roll, a messy critical or something like that, and his venture side is going, come right out.
I think you're very calculated as a player, so it's not like, and it fits perfectly with Vaughn's character, just fucking going roll, using powers, and that's why he's a hungry boy. He's always hungry because he's just, he's the trickster of the group. I think Alex is the man with the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I'm glad you brought up Vaughn too, because that's another one. So Alex has got, on one hand, I mean, he didn't really have a Camarilla that was really very helpful. And in the one scene, like, you indicated with Justicar Parr, that the Camarilla isn't pulling out. They're not interested in London, or at least they're kind of like retracting their position for a little while. So they haven't been much help for him. And so what does he have? He has anarchs in the form of Gabriel and his gang in the bar. He has Killjoy, and he has Vaughn, and of course he has the Hecata, JK, and then he has Naomi, and so like most of those guys are really kind of like not conventional Camarilla stuff, and these are the people he has. These are the people, and so if he's not open minded and he's not tolerant, it's not going to go very far. And that's one of the things I loved about your setting. It's kind of like, okay, work with what you have instead of what you would normally work with, and that's one of the things that kind of gives justification, reason for his open-mindedness, his tolerance, his willingness to change things for the better, for inclusiveness and things like that.
And you didn't falter.
Yeah.
I feel Naomi was more shaken by the fact that the Camarilla were pulling out.
Yeah.
Alex is just like fuck it, I'm gonna do this
That's
anyways.
right.
Yeah,
We're doing it live.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like
yeah.
does not change my plans at all.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, kind of talking of moments. Can you think of it like a as a player an oh shit moment where you're thinking, oh fuck, this is gonna go so wrong?
Yeah, I can. This is actually fairly recent. Um, Not to give anything away because I know the episodes get
No,
posted.
it's fine. I'm gonna post this
Yeah,
after,
yeah.
so
Okay, sounds
spoilers is
good.
fine.
Yeah.
I'm
So when Alec, so there's this moment so there's two moments, and they both involve Bradford. So I want to start with the earlier one first. And so Bradford, the whole time, you've done a great job of like through his conversation with Gabriel, and he hasn't really kind of talked to Adrian very much, but he learns from Gabriel real early on that Bradford's an asshole. Basically, like, he tries to stick the child of Gabriel's child, Adrian's child together, and because they get along too well or something like that, he immediately like stops the experiment and kills them or something. I can't remember, but it's one of those things where like the impression was sent, that like, oh, okay, this guy really just doesn't. He's not a good guy at all, which is fine. This is World of Darkness, and he's a dark Ventru, and that's cool. So and he's also really very old, so lower humanity and all that.
mm-hmm.
So but
Humanity
he set up a
4.
great, kind of like dark father figurehead, in a very Cainite way. It was really, I mean, that was kind of like a gravitational pull that a lot of what Alex has been doing has been revolving around. And Bradford has always been kind of in the background there, and as a dark shadow kind of thing. And right from the start, like Alex thought, so the backstory is Alex's sire is at least presumed dead, if not dead, because yeah, in his backstory, like he felt the release that one might get when your sire is gone, and that sort of thing. And during the whole Operation Antigen crackdown, and then so he thinks he's free potentially, and then he shows up at this meeting, and there's Bradford, his grandsire, and it's just like, oh god. And it's true for World of Darkness, you're never free. And so there's always another shoe ready to drop, and which you've been so great at like doing. There's always something else to like, oh, this is going to happen. Oh, you thought everything. No, there's always something waiting in the wings. And so to take it forward from that, they went and killed Operation Antigen members and rescued Elaine. And then Killjoy goes and writes Blackstone on the wall. And so it's like, way to put the name in the headlights there, just like writing a bullseye right on Blackstone's back. And by proxy, Alex is back. And it's kind of like, it's like, okay. Yeah. But so Killjoy in his usual way kind of like unsettles the board a little bit there. But Alex takes it in his way and swings it to his advantage, which is kind of like how he's always doing. He's always trying to take these currents and, if he can manipulate them to his advantage, that's what he's going to do. That's just what he has to do. He's not the oldest, biggest fish in the pond, and so he has to work with all these pieces in the way to get his thing done. But after that happened, immediately after it happened, really, they got a summons. They got this letter to see the king, and so that was the first oh shit moment. It turned out it wasn't Bradford at all, but it was like one of those things like, okay, the name was written on the wall, we're all going to die. That's what was going through my head. And I said, well, okay, I guess I'll deal with this myself, as Alex and the other coterie member. I think they were all kind of on board with what I was thinking, and they're like, no, you shouldn't do that, we should at least go with you and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're not going alone.
It was kind of a lovely moment of kind of like team bonding. But then fast forward to just the last episode, and for all of you players, and viewers watching it, there's been a lot of conversations for the last few weeks behind the scenes of like, okay, taking the throne. and how to do that and how it's going to be done and everything else and what needs to happen. And so that was kind of like the context off scene for everything that's kind of like happening in this episode, which is there's this detente and this agreement with the Heralds of the Sun through Harry. And then immediately afterwards, Victor steps through with a portal. He's the Tremere is really close to Bradford and says, y'all need to come with me because Bradford's not happy. and, and immediately what crosses my mind is like, oh, shit. Like the Nosferatu or somebody fucking talked, and that sort of thing. And it's just like, and so here we go again. We're going to get dragged into the principal's office type of thing. And this whole thing is going to fall apart. And so they go through, and there's Bradford. And the very first freaking line you have him say is like, what do we do to traitors, Alex? It's like, like, oh, here it comes, but of course he's not talking about Alex, but that's not immediately clear right from the outset. He's sitting there with this person, she's kneeling by a well and everything. It's like the tension level is like, oh shit. And so like he thinks he's been found out, and then it becomes very clear that he's not referring to Alex, and Alex is like, okay, he sees his opportunity. And it's not the opportunity he planned for, but it's the opportunity that's there. And so your camera's
I don't know
it's distracted by the cat or something. I don't know. There you are. And so so basically it's in that moment, I guess as a player it felt like 5 hours, but it was one of those more like a few minutes. It was like I was sitting there in my mind like, are we going to do this right now?
I mean, you pulled the rock under me again. If you look at my face when you said like I'm going to stab him, I'm just like, okay, what the fuck? I did not expect this.
Right.
That's the thing. Like I usually say, don't ever think players are going to do what you think they're going to do, because they will surprise you. And that's that's the fun part.
Right, exactly. And frankly, he had never planned to be in that situation. His alternative was, and the way I think you thought it was going to go down was, okay, he's going to Diablerize the other vampire there. And
I was just going to see if I could break Alex.
Yeah.
Or make him lose one humanity. Which I did.
Which he did. Yeah, you did. Yeah. Just not in the way you thought. Yeah. And so it's just like, but he, as a player, I knew that if I hit the go button there, if I said, okay, let's do this, I was bringing my other players with me on that. And I didn't expect you as a storyteller to be like, okay, well, you guys are not, he's going to kick your ass, but maybe you'll get out or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you could have done that, but it's one of those things where like, I thought, at least for those few minutes, long and hard about like what I was about to do. And I thought, okay, is this fair to them and that sort of thing.
I thought, what would a very arrogant elder Ventrue do? Obviously, try to dominate everyone.
Right.
And even if you're old, if you're 4 against 1 as Kindred, you're most likely gonna lose. And with that sword in hand, that really helped. I don't think you could have done it without it.
No, not without Excalibur. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I did. I made a number of calculations right in that moment. Like, what would Alex do? What can he potentially do? He had Killjoy there. He had JK. Naomi wasn't quite on the scene at that point. But it was like, what? We can do this. We can do this. And this is what Alex would do. Like, he is not going to Diablerize someone else he's not familiar with or whatever just for the sake of it. That's something Killjoy might do. he's not going to do that. And so, he's going to, and so that's what he did. And it was a big move. Like I was going boom, 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 boom. Like it was a thing like, okay, this is it. And we're either going to really go sideways with this, or we're gonna come out on top.
Horribly wrong if all of you just succumb to that
Exactly,
domination, that would have been a
exactly.
shit
Yeah,
show.
it could have gone horribly wrong, and I knew that all along, and I was just like, okay, we need to make this happen. Please let it happen, you know?
I had to think like Victor was my way of saving you guys if
Yeah,
it ever came to like people being beaten into torpor and things like that.
right.
Just to not stop the game, of course. I mean, I don't want to intentionally kill my players.
Right, right.
That is not good for the story. But speaking of Bradford and Alex promising Gabriel that he would be there, how do you think he's gonna react when he finds out he missed it?
Oh yeah, yeah. He'll be like, "Well, you left me out of it," you know. Like I expect him to be like, completely like, "Oh, you took the revolution away from me, man," you know, that sort of thing. Like you stole my show there. You stole my thunder, and you know, Alex is going to take that energy. You know, my intentions for him, you know, because he's anticipating that reaction, with a little more than a little amusement, and he's going to take that energy and go, okay, but I've got other fish for you to beat the shit out of. So, yeah, like don't worry, you'll get your chance, type of thing. And you know, because this isn't done yet, and yeah, this is one more step.
And
So.
unfortunately, you can't just punch the prince in the face.
No, no, you can't. Yeah, yeah. He's gonna be like, "Arr!" Yeah. Gotta exercise some real restraint there. You know, maybe you'll punch the doors. I don't know, but yeah, he's expecting that kind of reaction. He's not gonna be flapped by it at all. He's just like, he expects it.
Yeah.
Like
Well, you
he
did
my
solve the
inclination is
issue.
to say you're too slow, but that might push Gabriel over the edge.
I don't know if there's gonna be a frenzy roll or not, but we'll
It
figure it
might
out.
be. It
Yeah, it
might be.
might be.
Yeah.
It depends on how nice you are, I guess. We'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
I might have to dominate him, you know, and go, you'll get your chance. You
Yeah.
know, like that sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely something where I would expect Gabriel to lose his shit, and kind of like on one hand he's really happy, on the other hand it's like, you left me out of this, you know. So
Well, you
yeah.
did achieve, and uh, quite adeptly. What you're trying to do is just you promised them a week.
Yes.
Fuck it, moving up the timetable.
Moving up the timetable, and
We're,
that's what Alex, you know, he if he sees, you know, he's again, that's kind of like one of the other two things about his personality. Like on one hand he'll quietly and like slowly move pieces along here and there, but if there's a straight shot to accomplish his goals right there, he's going to take it. Like
mm,
he's not going to mess around. He's going to be like, fine, let's do this.
I think that's
And
also like a sign of his age. Still,
his
he's
age,
not
yeah,
that
exactly, he's
paranoid
very
yet.
young, yeah.
Um,
So yeah, so he's going right for it, and that's what he's going to do. And he really doesn't, he really has a disturbing lack of fear. I see that, I see that as being part of his Ventru thing, you
it's
know. It's
it's
like he,
almost like you have a certain conviction. I don't know.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly, like he has a certain conviction where, you know, combined with his inherent, he has an inherent you know, belief. I'm not going to call it a conviction, even though in another world I might. He has an inherent belief in himself that he is destined to rule and destined to, you know, uh, lead
with the
London into the future.
with the blessings of the Dark Mother.
Exactly, exactly. She's got his back. So, which was a nice little. There was something you did, like I mentioned this after the game, but it was one of those things where I come back to it, where Harry Livingston, who is a vizier, herald of the sun, you know, he's bonded, blood bonded six to Mithras and everything like that. He's espousing Mithras's. I mean, he's basically represented for Mithras, who's a blood god. If you're familiar at all with World of Darkness lore, especially around the UK, you're probably familiar with Mithras, and you know, because he considers it Avalon and everything else. He's, yeah, that's kind of his, has been his backyard forever, and so he's sitting there, you know, talking about like Mithras and, you know, this walking blood god, and Alex is like, you know what? I follow other powers, you know, like there are other powers that, and right then, like the lights dim and this brand new like mythical plant that's growing in his place like sprouts a bloom, and it's just like, yeah, yeah, you got Mithras,
Mm.
Lilith,
Something a little bit older.
exactly, yeah. I see your Mithras. I'm going to raise you Lilith. So, yeah.
Doing all the calculations that
That's
eventually work.
right. That's right.
Um, Before we end this, um, I I've asked you questions, a lot of questions. Is there anything you would like to ask me that you might think the viewers would like to know, or that you would like to know?
That's a great question. Um, I don't, nothing really comes to mind at this point. No, what I want to say is I want to praise you as an ST. That's what I want to do.
Mm.
Is I want to say that you've been a great ST. You have allowed us to explore our character arcs in a way that didn't feel like we were railroaded. Like I never felt railroaded
I'm very happy
with
about
what you
that
did.
because
Yeah.
I'm trying so goddamn hard that
From one ST to another is difficult to have a plot and at the same time, not put somebody on the rails. So I never felt railroaded. You've been great with working with me and talking with me about things and giving me options, giving us options in terms of how to develop our characters, while at the same time you've done a great job of keeping things interesting by continually, not overwhelmingly, but continually, just at the moment when things start to feel like they're settling down a little bit, another thing comes in.
mm,
And it's like whether it's Naomi's sire, or whether it's Judith, or whether it's uh, Operation Antigen, or whether it's Heralds of the Sun, or any of these things. Like just about the time things look like they're going to start to settle down, it's like, here you go. Here's something else to deal with. And
well, you
so
guys
you keep it
are
interesting.
you guys have like you've tied one tiny knot now,
Right.
and there's like a
Right.
whole rope of things that you
Exactly.
need to deal with.
In the post game, I compared it to like Elder Scrolls, where it's like you complete a quest and 12 more appear,
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how it's been. And it's been really engaging in a way that it doesn't feel random. I've been in games where the ST is just kind of like throwing oranges at you. And so it doesn't feel like, oh, let's roll the dice and see what, the magic 8 ball says or whatever. It feels very intentional. It feels like it's being done with care and with attention to our backstories and
I
who we
I
are.
I
Yeah.
never really know when I'm gonna drop it in, but I
Right.
always know that when given the opportunity, like a quiet moment, or when things settle down, or the player asks the right question. That's the most genius one. When players are
Exactly.
they're curious about something, and I actually have things planned for that exact topic or a person, and well, I'm really happy that it's coming through the way I want it to.
Yeah. So anybody out there who's ever wanting to be an ST, like pay attention. Like that's how you do it. You have these different occurrences or different events. Like you also had Vaughn's brother, his blood brother there, like show up. You had Nira introduced at an appropriate time when Naomi was in Alex's place. You had all these things, and all these things are connected to their characters, to their clans, to their stories. They're all meaningfully connected, and so as an ST, you're sitting there and you're thinking about the timing and when to introduce those things in the words of Jason Carl, at a dramatically appropriate moment. So it's one of those things where that is really a great ST skill. And so, as someone who's done my own bit of like DMing and things like that, it's really a great skill to be able to do that. Really hard to master, to really have those cards to play in a meaningful way. But anybody who wants to take a crack at that, like, yeah, like really look at your characters, you know,
Also, just as I said, like having event triggers
yeah,
and a red thread, because
exactly.
players will not react the way, and sometimes they'll
Exactly
just
right.
like
Yeah.
do something where
Yeah.
you have to just, and that's okay as well. Just sit there and okay, I need to think about this for just one
Right.
second
Right.
and figure out the logical solution to this problem. And
Exactly.
I'm not
Exactly. I think it's
I'm not a super experienced vampire GM.
yeah.
I'm really not. I've played Dungeons and Dragons for like 20 years, but it's only within like I think 2 years I've gotten into V5, and it's very
Right.
different than putting people inside a dungeon and creating rooms and here's a monster and here's a
Yeah,
trap
exactly.
and things like
Yeah,
that.
it is. It is
Uh,
very different, but you're doing it well, and it shows that some of those skills can and do carry over. Is one of those things where like, and just what you said, like setting up scenarios and situations rather than outcomes
mm,
is really key. That's really so important. Is being able to set up trigger events rather than outcomes, and that's one of the things that I think is a key piece of advice for anybody else to take to heart. Is like don't try to set up outcomes that are supposed to happen. Set up spaces for your players to,
because
yeah,
ultimately it's the players and the dice who create the outcome.
right, exactly, exactly,
I'm
and
just
that's as it should be.
I'm just telling
Yeah,
it. That's really kind words to end it
yeah,
on, I think. And
I agree.
maybe when we're done a couple more episodes, maybe Alex will be back to talk about what's going to happen now, because we are going into interesting times of rulership,
We are, we
and
are.
things might happen that are worth discussing, I feel.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, as they say. So yeah, there's gonna he's about to shoulder a lot here. So it'll be very interesting.
I think I've dressed you for leadership very intentionally,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's I want you to gave you the tools, but with huge drawbacks. If anyone saw the one with the sword and understood the mechanics of it, it's not something you just pull out whenever you see fit.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
for killing things like Bradford, and
That's right.
exactly. Uh,
It's the nuclear option, as it were. You know, like,
yeah,
it's a weapon of last resort,
it's DEFCON
and
5, and here
yeah,
we go.
exactly. And it has had an effect on Alex, and that's one of the role playing challenges that I hope to meet and rise to the occasion with,
I think
in
that will
next
be
in
really
future
interesting
episodes.
to
Yeah.
see how, because we did this off screen, of course, but Alex, he had so many stains from that
Oh
episode
yeah.
that it's just, I'm just gonna drop humanity because
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Exactly.
Of
Exactly.
of
And that,
course,
as a player, I basically decide upon that. I embraced that decision because he had to, and it was one of those things where it just made all the sense in the world. And that's the thing. That's, I mean, if there's any advice as a player in a World of Darkness game, especially a vampire, is to embrace, like, the flaws as well as the degeneration, things like that, as well as struggle to maintain humanity. It's a tug of war between those, and the game is best when you're trying to do both those things. So yeah.
and if you play long enough, it's unavoidable.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of, it
You
shares
guys
that with like
have
Call of
not.
Cthulhu.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you will
it's
go
one of those things
crazy
where, yeah.
eventually. Yeah. But you
Exactly.
guys haven't dealt with mortals that much, which was
Yeah,
intentionally, because you can, if you want to, create a really horrifying experience where you just
absolutely.
frenzy in crowds all the time and kill humans left and right. Uh, but again, that can, the decline can be too fast,
Yeah,
and you might not even notice that it's happening as someone who's watching. Uh,
yeah,
so I had a character who went from 8 humanity to 5, and because of that, she was truly goody goody. And now everyone just thinks she's a complete psychopath because the difference is vast. Again, because of kind, really. Because I think that's the easy way of giving stains. It's
Yeah.
just, oh, he did something horrible to a human, but like being corrupted by oblivion and having this really powerful, the sort of sin, it's
Right.
obviously
Right.
not a good thing.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that the game, this is just my personal opinion, of course, but think that Vampire is a game that thrives, at least in the experience, on maintaining the tension between those two things of like trying to hold on to and maintain humanity at the same time. This beast is always pulling you down, and
Hmm.
that sort of thing, and always pulling you in the other direction. So it's like,
Well, I'm trying to, but you're not making it easy for me.
yeah, 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 right, exactly. And that's the point. It's like,
Yeah.
if it's too easy in one direction or the other, it's there's all the suspense and the tension, which is so critical to a vampire game, starts to kind of melt away. So it's one of those things like I want to keep that nice and tight there, in the sense of like keeping those two things balanced, which is why Alex is going to take the time, and why he something he's flaunted since the beginning is his ability to eat food and drink. Just everybody else is perplexed by this, but it's just one of those things. It's one of the things that I deliberately took, not just because I mean it's a way for him to, it's a reasoning for why the SI and Operation Antigen hasn't caught on to him yet, but also it keeps him connected to people. Like it's one of those things where like he still has that quirk of his is like he's still able to eat and drink and be
Hmm.
merry, like normal people.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And it fits him very
yeah,
human. But
yeah.
I'm very interested to see
I am too.
how we're gonna take this in the future. And I want to thank you so much for doing this. It's been
Thank
really
you. Thank
awesome.
you for having me. Yeah, and for the great questions, and for allowing me to talk a little bit about Alex.
I think it's a good opportunity, and I personally love this, and I hope people at home enjoy it as well.
I hope
But
so as well.
ultimately, I do it for myself and you guys.
Of course, of course.
So yeah, thank you everyone at home for listening in, and I hope you really enjoyed it.